She only wanted to wait for the light to turn green. But what she saw at that corner turned her life upside down. And from that moment on, nothing was silence anymore. It was early winter in Boston, when the first silent drizzles began to mark the cold mornings in the city. The fast-paced routine of downtown didn't slow down, even with the grey sky and melancholic climate that shrouded the streets. Among honking horns, street vendors, and old buildings, lives continued intertwined without many even noticing each other. Olivia Parker observed the city from the window of her office on the 20th floor of one of the most imposing buildings on Commonwealth Avenue. At 38, she was the personification of business success, elegant, discreet, and determined. As heiress and current CEO of the Parker Luxury Network, she commanded more than 50 luxury goods stores spread across the country. Her name was synonymous with sophistication in the society columns, and her presence was sought after at charity events, always with generous donations, but made at a distance with cold and impersonal transfers. She consulted her wristwatch, an exclusive model valued at more than $100,000, a gift she had given herself upon completing a decade at the helm of the family business. She was late for a meeting with international investors. She picked up her Italian leather briefcase, adjusted her impeccably cut blazer, and headed for the private elevator. On the ground floor, 2 security guards were waiting to escort her to the armored car parked at the entrance of the building. It was part of the routine, the security protocol that isolated Olivia from the real world. Inside the vehicle, the driver had already programmed the route to the luxury hotel where the meeting would take place. "We can go, August," she said, firmly while opening her briefcase to review some documents. The driver nodded, and the car glided through the downtown streets. Olivia barely raised her eyes to the urban landscape unfolding on the other side of the tinted windows. For her, the city was just a blurred backdrop between appointments. The people on the sidewalks seemed like extras in a movie she watched, without much interest, until that morning. The traffic was especially slow near Central Square, the beating heart of the Massachusetts capital. August suggested a detour, but they were already trapped between accumulating vehicles. Olivia sighed impatiently and decided to answer some emails while they waited for the flow to normalize. That's when something unusual captured her gaze. At the edge of the pedestrian area, a tall, disheveled man was shouting at a dirty and frail child, shaking him violently by the shoulders. The boy, appearing to be no more than 10 years old, tried to break free, but his movements were slow, as if hunger and fear prevented him from reacting properly. The most disturbing thing was the indifference. Dozens of people passed by, avoided them, pretended not to see. No one intervened. Olivia felt something strange stir inside her, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years, genuine empathy, not the calculated kind for corporate social responsibility reports. "Stop the car," she ordered suddenly. "Ma'am?" August looked through the rearview mirror, confused. "Stop the car now, August." Before the security guards could question, Olivia had already opened the door and stepped onto the sidewalk, dampened by the fine drizzle. Her designer Italian heels echoed on the asphalt as she crossed the street with determined steps, ignoring honking horns and looks of astonishment. The Olivia who calculated every move, who never acted on impulse, seemed to have remained in the back seat of the armored car. As she approached, she realized the situation was even worse. The boy had visible bruises on his arms and an empty gaze that spoke of deep trauma. "Let him go," she said with the same voice she used to end discussions in board meetings. The man, surprised by the interruption, turned to face her. He was tall, with an unshaven beard and reddened eyes. He smelled of alcohol even at that hour of the morning. "Don't get involved where you weren't called," he growled, squeezing the boy's arm even tighter. Olivia didn't back down. Something inside her had awakened, a strength she didn't even know she possessed. "I said let him go. Now." The security guards were already positioning themselves behind her, creating an intimidating barrier. The man, realizing he was at a disadvantage, pushed the boy to the side and took a step toward Olivia. "You have no idea what you're getting into," he muttered, with a contained anger that made the hairs on Olivia's neck stand up. "That kid owes me and a lot. Whatever debt he has, consider it paid. Olivia replied, keeping her voice firm despite her racing heart. The man spat on the ground and, after giving the boy one last threatening look, walked away, muttering obscenities. He disappeared among the downtown alleys, like a shadow dissolving in the mist. The boy remained still, as if he didn't understand what had just happened. His dark eyes, enormous in his thin face, alternated between Olivia and the direction where the man had gone. He seemed to be waiting for him to return at any moment. "Are you okay?" asked Olivia, bending down to be at the boy's height. He didn't answer, just took a step back, suspicious. "I'm not going to hurt you. What's your name?" Silence. The boy just watched her, like a cornered animal assessing whether to trust or flee. "Ma'am, we need to go," interrupted one of the security guards. "The investors are waiting." Olivia looked at her watch, then at the boy, and then made a decision that would change the course of her life, although she didn't know it yet. "Cancel the meeting," she ordered, to the amazement of her team. "Say, I had a family emergency." Then she took off her coat and extended it to the boy. "Come with me," she said with a gentleness she hadn't used in a long time. "I'll take care of you." The decision to take him with her wasn't premeditated. It was done almost involuntarily, as if something inside her had awakened after years of emotional inertia. As she guided the boy to the car, she felt strangely light, as if she had found something she didn't even know she was looking for. In the back seat, wrapped in an emergency blanket retrieved from the glove compartment, the boy seemed even smaller, more fragile. He trembled, perhaps from cold, perhaps from fear. Olivia ordered August to turn on the heating and head for the mansion in Beacon Hill. During the entire journey, the boy didn't say a word. He just observed the city gradually transform, the old downtown buildings giving way to more modern constructions, and finally to the imposing mansions that rose on the hillsides. The rain had increased, creating a curtain of water that distorted the landscape and amplified the silence inside the car. When they arrived at the Parker residence, a contemporary construction of straight lines and large glass windows, the contrast between the boy and that environment was striking. He was a body too small for the space, with eyes too large for so much silent pain. Simone, the housekeeper who had worked for Olivia for more than 15 years, couldn't hide her surprise when she saw her enter accompanied by that ragged child. "Ma'am, what?" she stammered, looking alternately at Olivia and the boy. "He needs a hot bath and clean clothes," cut in Olivia as she led the boy through the entrance hall. "And food too. Prepare something substantial but light. I think he hasn't eaten properly for days." Simone nodded, still confused, and hurried to comply with the orders. The other employees observed the scene with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. They had never seen their boss act so impulsively. In the guest room, Olivia helped the boy get settled. He continued in silence, accepting help with a passivity that was both moving and concerning. "You're safe here," said Olivia, as the boy sat on the edge of the king-size bed, looking tiny against the white pillows. "No one is going to hurt you." For the first time, the boy seemed to react. His eyes filled with tears, but none fell. It was as if he had learned to swallow his crying, to not show weakness. While Simone accompanied him to the bath, Olivia sat in her personal office and tried to process what she had just done. She had brought a complete stranger to her home, cancelled a crucial meeting, all for an inexplicable impulse. What would she tell the board, the press, her own mother, who always criticized her for not having started a family? But for some reason, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. For the first time in years, she felt she had done something truly significant, something beyond numbers in financial statements or social appearances. When Simone returned, her expression was grave. "Ma'am, the boy. He has marks all over his body. It seems he's been mistreated for a long time." Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of indignation. "Call Dr. Reynolds. I want him to examine the boy immediately." "And what about the authorities? Shouldn't we contact Child Protective Services?" The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Olivia knew what she should do, what would be legally correct, but something inside her resisted. She had seen how people passed by that boy without seeing him. She feared the system would do the same. Not yet, she decided. First, let's take care of him. Tomorrow we'll think about the next steps. That first night, the boy slept deeply, exhausted from years of survival on the streets. Olivia, meanwhile, remained awake, watching the rain through her bedroom window. She felt she had reached a crossroads in her life, and that the path she chose from there would transform her forever. On the other side of the city, in a run-down bar downtown, the man who had assaulted the boy was drinking. Compulsively, brooding over his hatred. Ronald wasn't the type of person who forgot an insult, and that rich woman, with her security guards and her air of superiority, had just created a dangerous enemy without even knowing his name. The first. Rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains of the guest room, forming golden patterns on the noble wooden floor. Olivia stopped at the door, observing the boy who slept curled up even in the vastness of that bed. During the night, he had had nightmares. She had heard him scream incomprehensible words until the name Sophie emerged clearly among the sobs. When she ran to check, she found him sitting up, eyes wide with terror, breathing heavily. Now, in the gentle light of morning, he seemed almost at peace. Dr. Reynolds, a personal friend and trusted doctor of the Parker family, had examined him the night before. Besides the malnutrition and bruises, there were no serious injuries. Physically, he'll recover quickly, the doctor had said, with that look that communicated the unsaid. The emotional scars would take much longer. "Good morning," Olivia said softly, when she noticed the boy had awakened and was watching her with attentive eyes. "Did you sleep well?" He limited himself to nodding, still suspicious. "Are you hungry?" Simone prepared a complete breakfast. Another nod. Olivia smiled and extended her hand, which he didn't hold. Instead, he got out of bed by himself and waited for her to show the way. He was a child who had learned not to depend on anyone. In the dining room, the table was set for 2 people. Seeing the amount of food, breads, cakes, fruits, juices, the boy's eyes widened. Olivia realized that it might be the first time he had seen such abundance. "You can help yourself as you wish," she said, indicating the chair across from her. He sat down timidly and waited, as if expecting permission to start. Olivia served herself first, demonstrating that the food was safe, and only then did he take a piece of bread, which he ate slowly, savoring each bite. "I need to go to the office today," she commented, trying to establish some connection. "But Simone and Teresa will stay with you. They're trustworthy people." The boy stopped chewing for a moment and his eyes filled with alarm. "I'll come back at the end of the day," Olivia assured him, interpreting his fear. "You're safe here." He's resumed eating, but something in his posture had changed. He was more tense, as if calculating escape routes. After breakfast, Olivia showed him the rest of the house, the library with shelves that went from floor to ceiling, the TV room with an impressive sound system, the garden with a pool that could be seen through the glass windows. The boy observed everything with a contained curiosity, as if he feared showing too much interest. "This can be your room for now," she said, when they returned to the room where he had slept. "We can decorate it however you want." He walked to the window that offered a panoramic view of the city. Below, Boston stretched out like a carpet of concrete and lights. The boy rested his hand on the glass, as if trying to touch the distance. "Do." "You like the view?" asked Olivia. For a moment it seemed he would respond. His lips moved slightly, but then he retreated to the silence that seemed to be his refuge. As she prepared to leave, Olivia gave specific instructions to her staff. The boy should not be left alone at any time. They needed to observe him without being invasive, offer food regularly, and above all make him feel safe. "I've hired a child psychologist," she informed Simone. "Dr. Rachel will arrive at 2 in the afternoon. She has experience with traumatized children." "And what about the police, Child Protective Services?" insisted the housekeeper, visibly concerned. "We'll wait for Dr. Rachel's report," Olivia evaded. Deep down, she knew she was postponing the inevitable, but something prevented her from handing the boy over to the system. Not after seeing that look of abandonment, that palpable loneliness. At the office, Olivia tried to concentrate on work. There was a new collection to be launched, franchise contracts to review, an international expansion in progress. But her Mind constantly wandered to the mansion in Beacon Hill, to the boy with sad eyes and sealed lips. Sandra, her assistant for more than a decade, noticed her distraction. "Did something happen, Olivia?" she asked during a break between meetings. "You seem different today." Olivia hesitated. Sandra was more than an employee. She was perhaps the closest thing to a friend she had. Still, she had learned to maintain a professional distance from everyone. "I'm just tired," she replied, closing the door of her office to ensure privacy. Then, after a moment of reflection, she decided to trust her. "Actually, yes, something happened yesterday that caught me by surprise." Sandra listened attentively as Olivia related the encounter with the boy, the impulsive intervention, the decision to take him home. When she finished, she expected to see judgment in the assistant's eyes, but found only understanding. "You always said you wanted to make a real difference," Sandra commented. "Maybe that's what's happening. Or maybe I've completely lost my mind," sighed Olivia. "I don't know anything about this boy, not even his name. Give it time. He'll open up when he feels safe." The rest of the day passed in a succession of meetings and phone calls, but Olivia could hardly stay present. At 5 in the afternoon, she received a call from Simone. The boy was agitated, refusing to eat, and had locked himself in the bathroom. Dr. Rachel had not managed to establish meaningful contact with him. "I'm coming home," Olivia decided, cancelling her remaining commitments. Upon arriving at the mansion, she found a tense atmosphere. Teresa, the cook, seemed on the verge of tears. Simone had that expression of someone who knew something like this would happen, and August, the driver, was standing guard outside the bathroom where the boy had hidden. "He's been in there for 2 hours, Simone informed. "The psychologist said we shouldn't force him to come out." Olivia dismissed everyone and approached the door alone. "It's me, Olivia," she said calmly. "I've come back, as I promised." Silence. "I know you're scared. This place is new, the people are strange. It must seem like a completely different world from what you know." She slid down to sit on the floor, leaning against the door. "When I was about your age, I lost my father," she continued, surprising herself with her own sincerity. She never talked about this. It was sudden. One day he was there, the next day he wasn't anymore. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under my feet. Nothing made sense. No one understood me. From the other side of the door, she heard a slight movement. I used to hide a lot. In the closet, under the bed, in the attic, any place where I could be alone with my pain, until one day my grandmother came to get me. She didn't say everything. Would be okay. She didn't promise the pain would pass. She just stayed with me in silence. And that made all the difference. Olivia took a deep breath, feeling an emotion she had long buried. "I won't promise that everything will be okay. I don't know what you've experienced, what you've lost. But I'm here outside this door and I'll stay as long as you need." A minute passed, 2:05. When Olivia already thought she had failed, she heard the click of the lock. The door opened slowly, and the boy was there, eyes red from crying but dry now. "You said you'd come back," he murmured, with a voice hoarse from rarely being used. They were his first words, and they hit Olivia like a wave. She felt her eyes grow moist, but contained the tears. "Yes, I came back," she responded simply. That night the boy agreed to have dinner with her. He still ate little, still spoke less, but something had changed. There was a crack in that wall he had built around himself. Later, as Olivia checked if he was comfortable before going to sleep, the boy looked at her for a long time, as if making a difficult decision. "David," he said finally. "My name is David." It was a beginning, a small, precious beginning. The next morning, Olivia woke up to a phone call from Sandra. Her voice was tense. "You need to see this," said the assistant without preamble. "What?" "It just came out on Boston News Portal. Heiress of the Parker. Empire kidnaps child in downtown. They have photos, Olivia, of you with the boy getting into the car." Olivia's heart raced. Of course, someone had taken photos. In downtown Boston, with dozens of cell phones pointed at any unusual event, it was inevitable. "Who wrote the article?" she asked, although she already suspected the answer. "Adele Campbell." Olivia closed her eyes. Adele was known for her sensationalist journalism and an old personal feud with the Parker family. When Olivia's father refused to finance Adele's magazine project years ago, the journalist swore that one day she would expose the family's dirt. "I'm already preparing an official statement," Sandra informed. "Something about a humanitarian action, perhaps a temporary shelter program." "No," Olivia decided. "No statements, that would only feed more speculation." "But Olivia, we need to respond somehow. The phone won't stop ringing. Other media outlets are already picking up on it." "Let them talk. I have more important things to deal with right now." Upon hanging up, Olivia quickly browsed the news. Portals. The story was spreading like wildfire. Businesswoman kidnaps child in broad daylight. Olivia Parker, philanthropy or madness. Heiress of Parker luxury takes street boy to Beacon. Hill mansion. The comments were even worse. Some accused her of using the boy for personal marketing. Others speculated about emotional imbalance and affective deprivation. There were even those who suggested darker motivations for Olivia's interest in an unknown child. When she went down for breakfast, she found David already seated at the table, leafing through a book of photographs he had found in the library. Seeing her, he quickly closed the book, as if he had been caught doing something wrong. "You can continue looking," Olivia encouraged, sitting across from him. "Do you like photographs?" David hesitated, then nodded slightly. "They're different places," he murmured. "I've never seen anything like this." "They're landscapes from all over the world," explained Olivia. "My father loved photography. He traveled whenever he could, capturing these places." "Does he still travel?" The innocent question touched an old wound. "No," Olivia replied, controlling her voice. "He passed away when I was about your age." David studied her with those eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. "Do you miss him?" "Every day." A comfortable silence settled between them. It was no longer the tense silence of their first encounters, but something closer to mutual understanding. "People are talking about you," David suddenly said, "because of me." Olivia almost choked on her coffee. "How do you know that?" "I heard Simone and Teresa talking. They thought I was in the bedroom." "Don't worry about that," Olivia tried to reassure him. "People always talk, it's what they do best." "You'll have problems because of me," he insisted, with a painful maturity for his age. "It's better if I leave." "No," Olivia's response was immediate and firm. "You're not going anywhere, unless you really want to go." David lowered his eyes to the book again. "I don't want to," he admitted in a low voice. "But I also don't want to cause problems for you." "That's not your problem," Olivia smiled, extending her hand across the table to touch his lightly. To her surprise, he didn't pull back. "It's my decision, and I know how to handle the consequences." After breakfast, while David explored the garden under Simone's supervision, Olivia organized her day. She needed to go to the office, but planned to return earlier. Dr. Rachel would come again in the afternoon for another attempt at a session with David. As she was getting ready, something caught her attention. The jacket David was wearing when she found him, now clean and folded over a chair, seemed to have a strange volume in the lining. Intrigued, Olivia examined the piece and discovered a small tear in the inner fabric. Inserting her fingers carefully, she felt something, a piece of paper folded several times. It was a crumpled note with moisture stains that partially blurred the handwritten words. It was dirty, marked by rain, but still legible. Olivia carefully unfolded it. It contained an address in a peripheral region of the city, in the Hill Heights neighborhood, and below, a single phrase that made her heart tighten. "She's still there." Hill Heights, with its colorful houses stacked on the hillside, was a completely different world from Beacon Hill. Although geographically close, separated only by an avenue and a social abyss, the two neighborhoods represented opposite faces of Boston. On one side, mansions with panoramic views. On the other, shacks balanced on steep terrain, whose view was often blocked by high walls of neighboring properties. Olivia took a deep breath as August parked the car on the main street that led to the interior of the community. She was nervous, not out of fear, but from the sensation that she was approaching a truth that could change everything. "Are you sure you want to do this alone, ma'am?" asked the driver, visibly concerned. "I can accompany you." "I need to do this alone, August," she replied, checking once more the address noted on the note she had found in David's jacket. "But stay nearby. If there's any problem, I'll call you." She got out of the car, aware of the curious looks that followed her. It wasn't common to see a woman like her, perfectly arranged hair, designer clothes, elegant posture, walking through those alleys. Olivia felt exposed, out of place, but continued. The address indicated a house in the middle of a narrow passage. As she approached, she realized something was wrong. The windows were broken, the door ajar swinging with the breeze, and there were clear signs of abandonment. With caution, Olivia pushed the door. The interior revealed an interrupted story: simple overturned furniture, broken plates on the kitchen floor, a torn mattress in one of the bedrooms. On the walls, remnants of a family life, children's drawings attached with adhesive tape, a ruler marking the height of growing children. Olivia's heart accelerated when she saw the names handwritten. Next to the height marks, David, 8 years, and a little below, Sophie, 6 years. Sophie, the name David called out during nightmares. A noise in the street made Olivia turn quickly. An elderly lady was observing her from the sidewalk, leaning on an improvised cane. "What do you want here?" asked the elderly woman suspiciously. Olivia left the house, trying not to appear like an intruder. "I'm looking for information about the children who lived here, David and Sophie." The lady's countenance changed, softening. "Marlene's children," she said with a heavy sigh. "Poor children. Do you know them? Do you know what happened to them?" The elderly woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Zoe, indicated a small wooden bench on the porch of the neighboring house. They sat side by side, and the story began to unfold. Marlene was a single mother, worked as a maid in family houses in the Brookline and Beacon Hill regions. She raised her 2 children with difficulty, but there was never a lack of love. Until, about 8 months ago, she simply disappeared. One day she left for work and didn't return, Mrs. Zoe recounted, her voice choked with emotion. The children kept waiting. David took care of his sister as best he could, but they were just children. After a few days, a man appeared, said he was their uncle, but no one here had ever seen him before. "Ronald?" ventured Olivia. "Yeah, that one. Said he would take care of the kids, but we soon saw that he was no good. He drank, yelled at the children. Then he started taking David downtown, saying the boy had to learn to fend for himself. Sophie stayed alone, locked up. We gave food through the window when he wasn't around." Silent tears ran down Mrs. Zoe's wrinkled face. "One day when I came back from the market, the house was empty. He took both children. They said they saw him with the boy downtown begging for money. About the girl, no one had any more news." Olivia felt a lump in her throat. "And their mother? Didn't anyone look for her?" "We filed a report at the police station. But you know how it is. Poor woman who disappears, nobody cares much. They said she had probably found another man, another life, but those who knew Marlene knew she would never abandon her children." The conversation was interrupted by a group of children who passed running, flying kites in the small improvised field at the end of the street. Life continuing despite everything. "This Ronald, is he really related to the children?" asked Olivia, trying to organize her thoughts. Mrs. Zoe made a gesture of disdain. "Relative, my foot. Later we discovered that he was an old acquaintance of Marlene's ex-husband, the children's father. The man abandoned the family when the youngest was born, never gave any more news. This Ronald appeared out of nowhere saying he had rights over the children. And no one questioned him? Who was going to question him, my dear? Here we try not to get into trouble. And he showed some papers, said he had authorization. We even commented with the community agent, but without the mother to contest." Olivia thanked her for the information, and before leaving took a photo of the interior of the abandoned house, the drawings on the wall, the height marks, evidence of a family torn apart. On the way back, she called Sandra. "I need you to hire a team of private investigators, discreet and efficient." "What's happening, Olivia?" The assistant sounded concerned. "I'll explain later. For now, just do what I asked. It's urgent." Upon arriving at the mansion, she found David in the garden, watching the birds that bathed in a small fountain. He seemed more relaxed, less suspicious. When he saw her, something unusual happened. He smiled. It was a shy smile, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Olivia sat beside him on the stone bench. For a moment, they just contemplated together the flight of the birds, the movement of the clouds, the simple beauty of the world that followed its course. "I went to your house today," she finally said softly. She felt the boy's body immediately stiffen. "I found the address on the note that was in your jacket." David kept his eyes fixed on his own feet, which swung without touching the ground. "I talked to Mrs. Zoe. She told me about your mother, about Sophie." Upon hearing his sister's name, David raised his head, eyes wide with expectation. "Did you find her? Did you find my sister?" The question came out with urgency, as if it had been stuck in his throat for a long time. Olivia felt her heart tighten at seeing the hope in those eyes. "Not yet," she admitted, "but I will find her, David, I promise." The boy studied her for a long time, as if assessing the sincerity of that promise. Then, in a movement that surprised them both, he came closer and rested his head on Olivia's shoulder. It was the first spontaneous gesture of affection since they had met. "Thank you," he murmured. That night, as they had dinner, David seemed more communicative. He talked about the school he had attended until the previous year, about a math teacher who encouraged him, about how he liked to draw. They were fragments of a normal life that had been abruptly interrupted. "My mom always said I had talent," he commented, while playing with the food on his plate. "She kept all my drawings." "I saw some of them on the wall of your house," smiled Olivia. "They really are good." Sophie also drew, but they were just scribbles. She was 6 years old when... David's voice faltered. Olivia waited patiently for him to continue without pressuring. "When he appeared," he finally completed, "Ronald said he was our uncle, that he would take care of us until Mom returned, but we soon saw it was a lie." "What happened to your mother, David?" asked Olivia carefully. The boy shook his head. "I don't know. She left to work at a new house, said it was a special job that would pay very well. She never came back." His eyes filled with contained tears. "Every day I waited at the window. Sophie asked when Mum would come back, and I didn't know what to answer. And after Ronald appeared," David breathed deeply as if gathering courage. "At first he even tried to pretend he cared. He bought food, let us watch TV. But soon he started to drink to get violent. He broke things, yelled. Then he started taking me downtown. To beg for money. At first, yes. Then for other things." Olivia didn't want to press about what these other things were. The trauma was evident in the boy's eyes. "And Sophie?" she asked, fearing the answer. "He left her locked in the house, said she was too small to help. I always took a little food hidden. For her?" David's voice trembled. "Until one day we came back and she wasn't there anymore. Ronald said he had sent her to a better place, that she was fine, but I didn't believe it." "Was that when you wrote the note?" David nodded. "A lady from the market helped me. She suspected something was wrong. I wrote the home address and kept it in the jacket in case something happened to me too." The confession hit Olivia like a punch. That boy of just 10 years already thought about his own passage through the world, about the possibility of simply disappearing without a trace. It was a wisdom that was too cruel for someone so young. "David," said Olivia, gently holding the small hands between hers, "I'm going to find your sister, and we're going to discover what happened to your mother. You're not alone in this fight, anymore." For the first time since she had met him, she saw tears flow freely down David's face. They weren't tears of fear or despair, but of relief, the relief of finally sharing a burden too heavy for his childish shoulders. The next morning, the team of investigators hired by Olivia was already in position. They were 3 experienced professionals, former police officers with an extensive network of contacts. Olivia received them in her personal office, away from David's ears. "I want 2 simultaneous lines of investigation," she instructed. "First, find Sophie, David's sister, girl of approximately 6 years old, missing for about 3 months. Second, discover what happened to Marlene Taylor, mother of the children, missing for 8 months." "Do we have any starting point?" asked Cardoso, the oldest of the investigators. The last place where Marlene was seen was a house in Brookline, where she would do a cleaning job. We don't have the exact address, but we know it was a special service, according to what she told her son. And what about the girl? Disappeared from the house in Hill Heights, taken by a man named Ronald, who presented himself as the children's uncle. Cardoso made detailed notes. We'll need photos, physical descriptions, any document that can help with identification. We don't have any of that, admitted Olivia, just verbal accounts. And this, she added, showing the photo she had taken of the drawings and height, marks on the wall of the abandoned house. The investigators exchanged worried looks. It would be a difficult search with few concrete elements, but Olivia was inflexible. Money is not an issue. Use all necessary resources. Hire more people. If needed, just bring me results. When the men left, Olivia felt the weight of the responsibility she had assumed. She had promised David she would find his family, but the truth was she had no idea where to begin. What if Marlene had really abandoned her children? What if Sophie had been taken so far away that it would be impossible to track her? Shaking her head to dispel the negative thoughts, Olivia decided to focus on the present. David was safe now. It was a start. That day, for the first time since she had brought him home, Olivia didn't go to the office. She cancelled all appointments and dedicated herself entirely to the boy. She took him to a bookstore in the mall, where he could choose books and drawing materials. She observed, enchanted, how his eyes sparkled at so many possibilities. "Can I take this?" he asked timidly, showing a professional set of colored pencils. "Of course," smiled Olivia. "And any books you want too." At the end of the day, they returned home with bags full. Besides the art materials, there were new clothes, educational, games and a small collection of children's books that David had carefully selected, including some titles for younger children. "They're for Sophie," he explained, when Olivia questioned the choice. "For when she comes back." The confidence in the boy's voice was moving. He firmly believed that his sister would be found, that they would be a family again. Olivia felt the weight of the promise she had made. At night, while David slept, she received a call from Cardoso. "We have a lead on Marlene," said the investigator without beating around the bush. "A former colleague saw her entering a mansion in Brookline on the day of the disappearance. We've managed to narrow the search to a specific gated community." "Excellent," responded Olivia, feeling a wave of hope. "And what about Sophie?" There was an uncomfortable pause. "Still nothing concrete, but we're following a rumor about street children being taken to an abandoned warehouse in the North End. Region, we'll check tomorrow." Upon hanging up, Olivia felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They were progressing, but each new discovery also brought the fear of what they might find. What was the truth behind Marlene's disappearance? And in what conditions would they find Sophie if they found her at all? The next morning, Olivia was awakened by Simone, who knocked insistently at her bedroom door. "Ma'am, you need to see." "This," said the housekeeper, extending the tablet where a news site displayed a headline in bold letters, "Heiress of Parker Luxury invades community in search of missing child." The article, signed again by Adele Campbell, detailed Olivia's visit to Hill Heights and suggested that she would be conducting an illegal parallel investigation and interfering in cases that should be handled by the competent authorities. There were photos of her talking with Mrs. Zoe, entering the abandoned house, and even a distant image of David in the mansion's garden, although his face was blurred, a small journalistic mercy to preserve the minor's identity. "How did they get these photos?" asked Olivia, incredulous. "Someone must have recognized you in the community," suggested Simone, "or perhaps they followed the car." Olivia closed her eyes, trying to contain her anger. The exposure was bad enough for her, but putting David in the middle of this was unforgivable. "Sandra has already called 3 times, informed Simone, "and Mr. Mitchell too." Henry Mitchell was the Parker family's lawyer for decades. If he was trying to contact her with such insistence, the situation must be more serious than it seemed. Before she could return the calls, The mansion's intercom rang. Simone answered and returned with a grave expression. "Ma'am, it's Child Protective Services. They're here with a court order to verify the boy's situation." The visit from Child Protective Services transformed the peaceful morning into a whirlwind of tension. Two counselors, accompanied by a social worker, entered the mansion with serious expressions and clipboards in hand. Olivia, already recovered from the initial shock, received them with apparent serenity, although her heart beat rapidly. "We received an anonymous complaint," explained Martha Owens, the counselor who led the group. She was a middle-aged woman, with eyes that had seen too much child suffering to maintain any trace of naivety. "It states that you are keeping a child in an irregular situation in this residence." "David is under my temporary care," replied Olivia firmly. "It was an emergency measure. He was being assaulted on the streets. I understand your intention." The counselor's voice softened slightly. "But there are legal procedures to be followed. You should have contacted the authorities immediately." Olivia indicated the living room, where they could talk with more privacy. As they settled in, Simone appeared discreetly at the door. With an almost imperceptible nod, Olivia instructed the housekeeper to keep David occupied in another part of the house. She wanted to spare him from that confrontation. "Where is the boy?" asked Robert, the second counselor, a younger man with a suspicious expression. "He's having breakfast," replied Olivia. "Can we talk first? I don't want to frighten him." Camilla Torres, the social worker, intervened. "We need to assess the child's physical and emotional conditions, Ms. Parker. It's protocol." "And you will," assured Olivia. "But I ask that you consider the trauma David has been through. He only recently started talking to trust. A sudden approach could make him regress." Something in Olivia's sincerity seemed to touch the professionals. Martha especially appeared more receptive. "Tell us exactly what happened from the beginning." During the next hour, Olivia narrated everything. The encounter with David downtown, the impulsive decision to bring him home, the discoveries about his family, the search for Sophie. She showed the note found in the jacket, the photos of the abandoned house, the preliminary reports from the investigators. "I understand your concern," she said when she finished, "but I ask that you consider David's well-being above all. He has finally found a safe place." The three visitors exchanged looks that communicated years of shared experience with similar cases, and the awareness that this one somehow was different. "Still, we need to follow protocol," said Martha. "We would like to talk with him now." Olivia nodded and asked Simone to bring David. While they waited, Mr. Henry Mitchell, the lawyer, arrived hurriedly, summoned by Sandra upon learning of the unexpected visit. Olivia quickly briefed him on the situation. When David entered the room, his small body immediately tensed upon seeing the strangers. Instinctively, he positioned himself next to Olivia, as if seeking protection. She placed her hand on his shoulder, a silent gesture of support. "Hello, David," Martha smiled, adopting a gentle tone. "My name is Martha. These are Robert and Camilla. We've come to talk a little with you. Is that okay?" The boy looked at Olivia, who nodded encouragingly. "It's all right. They're people who want to help." The initial conversation was tense. David responded with monosyllables, suspicious. But as Martha demonstrated genuine interest in his well-being, without judgments or pressures, he began to open up. He talked about how Olivia had helped him, about the books he was reading, about his new room. When asked about Ronald, however, his body visibly stiffened. "He's not my uncle," he declared with surprising firmness. "He hurt us. He took Sophie away." The mention of the missing sister changed the tone of the conversation. The counselors, now visibly concerned, asked to speak with David alone. Olivia hesitated but understood the necessity. Accompanied by the lawyer, she withdrew to the veranda. "This is serious, Olivia," said Henry, as soon as they were alone. "You should have consulted me before bringing the boy here." "There was no time for consultations, Henry. He was being assaulted on the street." "I understand, but there are serious legal implications. The correct thing would have been to take David directly to Child Protective Services." Olivia faced the horizon, where Boston's sky presented itself in a blue almost painfully intense. And what would they have done? Put him in an overcrowded shelter? Returned him to an abuser who claims to be family? You know how the system works, Henry. The lawyer sighed, recognizing the truth in those words. Even so, we need to regularize this situation. I'll suggest temporary guardianship while we investigate the sister's and mother's case. After almost an hour, Martha came to get them. Her countenance had changed. It seemed softer, more understanding. David is an incredible boy, she commented, very observant and articulate for his age, despite everything he's been through. And so? Asked Olivia, trying to control her. Anxiety. We're going to prepare a report recommending that he remain under your care provisionally, replied the counselor, with weekly follow-up visits, of course, but we need to formalize this legally. Henry immediately stepped forward. I'm already preparing a request for temporary guardianship. We can file the petition today. As for his sister, continued Martha, we will open an official investigation. Sophie's disappearance needs to be treated with maximum urgency. And the man who claimed to be their uncle? Questioned Olivia. We'll issue an alert. If this Ronald appears, he'll be detained for questioning. When the representatives from Child Protective Services finally left, Olivia felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The immediate battle was won. David would stay, but a larger war was just beginning. She found the boy in the garden scribbling in his new drawing pad. Seeing her, he quickly closed it, as if protecting a secret. Are they gone? He asked, his small voice loaded with concern. Yes, confirmed Olivia, sitting beside him on the stone bench. And they said you can stay here, with me, for now. The relief on David's face was like a ray of sunshine breaking through dense clouds. For a moment, he seemed just a common child without the weight of so many losses. Can I see what you were drawing? Asked Olivia gently. Hesitantly, David reopened the pad. The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands, a tall woman, a boy, and a small girl. They were in front of a house that vaguely resembled the mansion where they were. In the sky, a smiling sun and stylized birds. It's very beautiful, commented Olivia, feeling a lump in her throat. Is that you, me, and Sophie, completed David, for when she comes back. The certainty in the boy's voice was so pure, so unshakable, that Olivia felt the weight of her promise multiply. Finding Sophie was no longer just a mission, it was a vital necessity, both for David and, surprisingly, for herself as well. That afternoon, while David had his second session with Dr. Rachel, now more productive, with the boy showing himself more receptive to therapy, Olivia received a call from Cardoso. We've identified the mansion in Brookline, informed the investigator. It belongs to a businessman named Gilbert Adams, influential man, owner of a construction company. And Marlene, is there any record of her working there? Officially, no, but a former employee confirmed that she was hired for a special service on the day of her disappearance. The curious thing is that no one saw her leave the property. Olivia felt a chill. Do you think something might have happened to her in there? It's a possibility we're investigating. Adams has a history of problems with female employees, 2 accusations of harassment that were silenced with financial agreements. Continue investigating. I want to know everything about this man and about what happened in that house. The second call came shortly after, from another investigator on the team. The news about Sophie was more promising. We found a witness who saw Ronald with a small girl in the North End region approximately 2 months ago. They've been tracking their whereabouts since then. Any information about where they might be now? There are rumors about an abandoned warehouse that serves as shelter for homeless people. We'll check it out today. Olivia could hardly contain her anxiety. I want to go with you, she decided impulsively. Ms. Parker, that wouldn't. Be prudent. It could be a hostile environment, and your presence would attract attention. She knew the investigator was right, but the idea of just waiting for news was unbearable. At least keep me informed in real time, she finally conceded. The following hours were of agonizing waiting. Olivia tried to distract herself by helping David with a puzzle, but her mind constantly wandered to the possible scenarios. What if Sophie was hurt? What if they didn't find her? How would she tell David? Dinner passed in a comfortable silence, only occasionally broken by the boy's curious questions about the books he was reading. Olivia admired his resilience, his ability to find small joys even amidst so many uncertainties. It was already past 9 at night when her cell phone finally rang. It was Cardoso. "We found her," he said simply. "She's alive." Olivia felt her legs weaken. She leaned against the nearest wall to avoid falling. "How is she?" "Physically, she appears to be fine, although malnourished. Emotionally, it's hard to say. She doesn't talk to anyone. She's in a state of shock." "Where is she?" "Now, on the way to St. Clara Hospital for a complete medical evaluation. Child Protective Services has already been notified." "I'm going there," Olivia decided. She looked at David, who was already sleeping deeply in his room. "Ask them to maintain absolute secrecy about who she is for now. I don't want the press involved before we can adequately protect her." At the hospital, Olivia was received by Martha, the child counselor who had visited her house that morning. Her face showed the fatigue of another day, facing society's open wounds. "She's sedated," she informed. "She was very agitated when she arrived." "Can I see her?" Martha hesitated. "Normally we wouldn't allow it. But considering the special circumstances and the fact that you have her brother under temporary guardianship, follow me." The room was small but welcoming, decorated with childish motifs on the walls. In the bed that seemed too big for her tiny body, Sophie slept. Her dark hair, tangled and opaque, framed a thin face with deep circles under her eyes that no child should have. Olivia approached silently, feeling her heart tighten. The girl didn't physically resemble David. Perhaps she had taken after her father, but there was something familiar in the curve of her lips, in her expression even during sleep. "Where did they find her?" asked Olivia in a low voice. "In an abandoned warehouse in the North End, as we suspected. She was hidden, in a corner, behind stacked boxes. According to the witnesses, she stayed there most of the time, coming out only when the place emptied." "And Ronald?" "No sign of him for weeks. Apparently he left the girl at the warehouse and disappeared. The homeless people who frequent the place minimally took care of her, gave her food when they could." The idea of a 6-year-old child surviving alone in those conditions was devastating. Olivia felt silent tears run down her face. "What happens now?" she asked, wiping away the tears discreetly. "Standard procedure would be to send her to an institutional shelter," replied Martha. But? The counselor sighed deeply. "Honestly, I think the best for her would be to stay with her brother. The separation would only deepen the trauma." Olivia felt a wave of hope. "Can I request temporary guardianship for her too?" "You can, and considering the history of the case, I believe the judge will be favorable. But I need to warn you, Sophie is in a much more serious state than David, emotionally speaking. She will require special care, intensive therapy." "I'll do whatever is necessary," assured Olivia, with a conviction that surprised even herself. 2 weeks ago, her biggest concern was the launch of the new jewelry collection from Parker Luxury. Now she was ready to reorganize her entire life for 2 children she barely knew. "When can I take her home?" "The doctors want to keep her under observation for 48 hours. After that, if the judge authorizes the temporary guardianship, she can be released." Upon leaving the hospital already in the early morning, Olivia called Henry. The lawyer answered with a sleepy voice, but immediately woke up upon hearing the news. "I'll file the request for temporary guardianship at dawn," he assured. "I'll argue for the urgency of the case and the need to keep the siblings together. With the recommendation from Child Protective Services, our chances are good." During the journey back to the mansion, Olivia allowed herself, for the first time, to glimpse a future beyond the immediate crisis. She imagined David and Sophie together again, recovering, going back to being children. She imagined herself helping them on this journey, being not just a temporary guardian, but a constant, significant presence. It was a frightening and comforting thought at the same time. For years, she had dedicated herself exclusively to the company, convinced that her fulfillment would come only from professional success. Now she realized that there was an emptiness in her life that no corporate achievement could fill. Upon arriving home, she went straight to check on David. The boy was sleeping deeply, hugging one of the new books he had chosen. Olivia adjusted the blanket over him, and in a gesture that was already becoming natural, brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. "We found her, David," she whispered. "Your sister is alive, and soon she'll be here with you." Perhaps it was imagination, but she seemed to see a slight smile form on the sleeping boy's lips. The next morning, the news could no longer be delayed. Carefully, Olivia sat with David during breakfast and told him about Sophie. She observed, moved, how the boy's face transformed, the initial shock giving way to a pure, almost uncontained joy. "Is she okay? When can I see her?" The questions came in a cascade, his eyes shining with expectation. "She's in the hospital receiving care," explained Olivia. "Physically, she's fine, but she went through difficult moments. She might not talk much at first. She might be frightened." David nodded, understanding perfectly. He himself had gone through this process. "Can I see her today?" "Not yet. The doctors need to take care of her for another day or two, but I'm working to bring her here as soon as possible." The boy was thoughtful for a moment. Then he got up abruptly and ran to his room. He returned minutes later with a colorful drawing, a simple but loving representation of his sister, smiling, with flowers around her. "Can you give this to her? So she knows I'm waiting." Olivia felt her heart warm with the gesture. "Of course, I'm sure she'll love it." Later, as she prepared to return to the hospital, Olivia received a call from Sandra. The assistant's voice had that tone that foreshadowed problems. "There's something you need to see," she said without preamble. "Journalist Adele Campbell published a new article. It's complicated." "What does she say this time?" "She's insinuating that you're using the children to improve your public image. She mentions internal sources who claim that it's all just a marketing strategy for the new Parker luxury campaign." Olivia felt her blood boil. "That's absurd." "There's more," continued Sandra. "She got information about Sophie's rescue. Published photos of the hospital, is speculating about the girl's condition. And the worst, she says that a man is claiming guardianship of the children, alleging to be a close relative." "Ronald," murmured Olivia, feeling a chill run down her spine. "Exactly. He gave an exclusive interview to Adele saying that you kidnapped the children who were under his legal care." The world seemed to spin around Olivia. How had that journalist gotten all this information? How had Ronald known about Sophie? And more importantly, what would he do now? "Sandra, I need you to do something urgent," she said, trying to organize her thoughts. "Contact our security team. I want reinforced surveillance at the mansion and the hospital. And tell Henry to accelerate the guardianship process. We don't have more time." Upon hanging up, Olivia looked through the window at the garden where David played under Simone's supervision. He seemed so peaceful, so oblivious to the storm that was forming. She had promised to protect him, to protect Sophie. And now that promise would be tested like never before. St. Clara Hospital, with its walls in pastel tones and the characteristic aroma of antiseptic, had become the epicenter of a silent battle. At the door of the room where Sophie remained, hospitalized, 2 security guards hired by Olivia stood discreet watch. Inside, the girl continued, mostly in silence, responding only with nods to the questions from doctors and nurses. Olivia spent most of the day sitting beside the bed, observing Sophie with a mixture of concern and fascination. Physically, she was better than expected, considering the circumstances. Her malnutrition wasn't severe, and the initial exams didn't indicate serious health problems. The real concern was her emotional state. "It's a defense mechanism," explained Dr. Cecilia, the child psychiatrist who was following the case. Selective mutism is common in children who have gone through intense trauma. She closes herself as a form of protection. "How long can it last?" asked Olivia, observing Sophie play distractedly with a teddy bear that a nurse had brought. Impossible to predict. It could be days, months. It depends a lot on the environment she's in, the treatment, and her own resilience. Olivia extended the drawing that David had made. "This is from your brother. He's anxious to see you." Sophie's eyes, large and dark like David's, fixed on the image. For an instant something seemed to light up in them, a spark of recognition, perhaps even of hope. Her small fingers touched the paper with delicacy, as if it were something precious and fragile. "David is fine," continued Olivia softly. "He's safe in my house, and he's waiting for you." A solitary tear ran down the girl's face. It was the first clear sign of emotion since she had been found. Olivia felt a lump in her throat, resisting the impulse to hug her. She knew that physical contact could be frightening for Sophie at that moment. In the corridor, Henry was waiting with news about the guardianship process. Olivia left briefly to talk with him, leaving Sophie under the care of a nurse. "The judge accepted our request for urgency," informed the lawyer. "We'll have a preliminary hearing tomorrow morning. The chances are good, especially with the support from Child Protective Services." "And what about Ronald?" asked Olivia, lowering her voice. Henry adjusted his glasses, a habit he had when the news wasn't favorable. He formalized a request for guardianship alleging to be the children's uncle. He presented a declaration supposedly signed by their mother. "That's impossible. David never mentioned him as a relative, and all the neighbors. Reports confirmed that he appeared only after Marlene's disappearance." "Exactly. That's why I requested an expert examination of the document. If it's forged, he'll face criminal charges." The conversation was interrupted by Olivia's cell phone. It was Cardoso, the investigator who was tracking Marlene's case. "We have important information," he said without beating around the bush. "We gained access to the security cameras of the gated community where Adams's mansion is located. We confirmed that Marlene entered the place on the date of the disappearance and never left, at least not through normal means." "What does that mean?" "It could mean many things, but it significantly increases the suspicion that something happened to her inside that property." "We need more than suspicions, Cardoso," pressed Olivia. "David and Sophie deserve concrete answers." "We're working on it. We've located the mansion's former gardener, who was fired at the same time. He agreed to talk but seems frightened. He says he has sensitive information." Upon hanging up, Olivia felt the weight of responsibility increase on her shoulders. What initially seemed an isolated act of violence against a street boy was revealing itself to be something much more complex and potentially darker. When she returned to the room, she found Sophie sleeping, David's drawing still firmly held between her fingers. The scene was moving, in its simplicity. A child who, despite everything, still clung to the fragments of her shattered family. On the way back home, Olivia couldn't stop thinking about Marlene. What special service had taken her to that mansion? What could have happened in there? And what was the connection with Ronald, who had appeared so conveniently after her disappearance? Upon arriving at the mansion, she found David anxious for news. His eyes brightened when Olivia told him that Sophie had received his drawing. "Did she say anything?" he asked hopefully. "Not yet, dear. She's very frightened, but I saw in her eyes that she was happy with your drawing. She didn't let it go, even for a minute." David nodded, perfectly understanding his sister's silence. "She was always quiet. Mum said she saved her words for important moments." The mention of the mother created an opening that Olivia couldn't ignore. "David, I need to ask something. About your mother. You said she went to do a special service on the day she disappeared. Did she mention who she would work for, or where the place was?" The boy frowned, concentrating. "She said it was in a very big house, of a very rich man. She said they would pay more than she earned in the entire month. Did she seem concerned or anxious?" "No," replied David after reflecting. "She was happy, said that if everything went well, we could move to a better apartment, maybe even in the South End neighborhood." Olivia absorbed the information, trying to fit it into the puzzle that was forming. If Marlene was optimistic about that job, what could have gone wrong? The night was restless. Olivia tossed and turned in bed, tormented by dark thoughts and concerns about the hearing the next day. Around 3 in the morning, her cell phone rang. It was the head of security at the hospital. "Ms. Parker, there was an incident," he informed, with a tense voice. "A man tried to enter the girl's room. When confronted, he fled. The cameras captured images, but he was wearing a hood." Olivia felt her heart accelerate. "Is Sophie okay?" "Yes, she didn't wake up. We reinforced security and notified the police. Keep me informed about any suspicious movement, and don't let anyone enter that room without my express authorization." Upon hanging up, Olivia knew she wouldn't be able to sleep anymore. She quickly dressed and went down to her office. If Ronald, for it certainly was him, was getting desperate to the point of trying such a risky approach, they needed to act quickly. She called Cardoso, despite the hour. "We need to accelerate the investigation about Marlene," she said as soon as he answered. "The situation is getting complicated." "Coincidentally, I was about to call you," replied the investigator, without any sign of sleep in his voice. "I just talked with Adams's former gardener. What he told me, well, it changes everything." "What did he say?" "I prefer not to discuss it by phone. Can we meet in an hour at the 24-hour cafe near your office downtown?" Cardoso's tone made it clear that the information was too sensitive to be shared electronically. Olivia agreed, although she hated the idea of leaving David alone after the incident at the hospital. "Simone," she called the housekeeper, who slept in a room near the kitchen. "I need to leave urgently. Stay alert and call at the slightest sign of anything suspicious. The security guards are on standby." In the almost deserted cafe at that hour of the early morning, Cardoso was already waiting for her at a table in the back. His normally impassive face showed clear signs of disturbance. "What did you discover?" asked Olivia, dispensing with formalities. Cardoso pushed an envelope across the table. "First, this. These are copies of the images from the security cameras of the gated community on the day Marlene disappeared. Note the time of entry." Olivia examined the photos. They showed Marlene, a young and beautiful woman, despite the simple clothes, entering through the service gate of the property at 2:37 p.m. "Now this," continued Cardoso, showing another image. "It's the only exit from the property, hours later." The photo showed a luxury car with dark windows leaving the mansion at 11:15 p.m. The driver was clearly Gilbert Adams. What does this mean? According to the former gardener, Adams used to hire women for special services that had nothing to do with cleaning. Some left shaken but well paid. Others— Cardoso hesitated, as if weighing his words. "Others what?" pressed Olivia. "Others simply didn't leave." The gardener mentioned at least 2 occasions when he saw Adams leaving late at night with something heavy in the trunk of the car. Olivia felt a shiver run down her spine. "Are you suggesting that he—" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," interrupted Cardoso. But the gardener also mentioned something interesting. Adams had an associate who sometimes appeared after these incidents, a man who took charge of solving problems. "Ronald," concluded Olivia, the pieces starting to fit together. "We don't have confirmation of that, but it's a possibility we're investigating. If Adams did something to Marlene and Ronald knows—" Olivia didn't complete the sentence. The implications were too terrible. Exactly. It would explain his sudden interest in the children, perhaps as a form of blackmail, or to ensure they remain silent. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process everything. "We need concrete evidence, Cardoso, not just suspicions." "We're working on that." The gardener mentioned a remote area on the property where Adams didn't allow anyone to approach. "We're trying to obtain a search warrant, but with his influence we—" "Do whatever is necessary," decided Olivia. "Use my contacts, my name, my money. We need to discover the truth for David and Sophie." Upon returning home, it was already dawning. Olivia took a quick shower and prepared for the guardianship hearing. She felt exhausted but determined. Now that she was beginning to understand the dimension of what they were facing, she couldn't back down. David was already awake when she went down for breakfast. He seemed to have slept well, oblivious to the disturbing discoveries of the early morning. "Are we going to see Sophie today?" he asked hopefully. "Yes," confirmed Olivia, forcing a smile. "But first I have an important meeting with the judge. If everything goes well, maybe we can bring her home soon." She went up to her room, took a long shower and tried to rest for a few hours. But sleep didn't come. Her mind was racing with everything she had discovered, with the decisions she needed to make, with the words she would use to explain to the children what had happened to their mother. Around 10 in the morning, the phone rang. It was Sandra, reminding her of the board meeting at 2 in the afternoon. Amid everything, Olivia had almost forgotten about Gregory's attempt to remove her from the company presidency. "I'll be there," she assured. "And Sandra, thank you for holding down the fort during this period." "Don't thank me yet," replied the assistant with a touch of humor. "Gregory has mobilized quite a bit of support. It's going to be quite a battle." Olivia smiled despite everything. It wouldn't be the first. When she went downstairs again, she found David and Sophie in the kitchen, having breakfast under Teresa's watchful eye. Seeing her, David opened a smile that illuminated his tired face. "You came back," he said simply. "As promised," replied Olivia, sitting at the table with them. She observed Sophie, who ate in silence, but seemed less tense than the day before. "How are you both doing?" "Good," replied David, speaking for both as had already become habit. Sophie slept better with the medicine the doctor prescribed. Olivia took a deep breath, preparing for the inevitable conversation. "We need to talk about something important. Something about your mom." David's body immediately stiffened. Sophie stopped eating, her wide eyes fixed on Olivia. "The police found you had clues about what happened to her," she continued, choosing her words with extreme care. "Unfortunately, they aren't good news." Silent tears began to roll down David's face, as if he already knew what would come next. Sophie remained motionless, in a silence that now seemed even deeper. "Your mother, she won't be able to come back to you," said Olivia, her voice breaking. "There was an accident in the house where she went to work that day. She's... you. I mean, she..." David couldn't complete the sentence. Olivia nodded gently, confirming what words couldn't express. "I'm so sorry, so very sorry." David's crying, until then contained, exploded into sobs that shook his small body. Sophie, in contrast, remained in a frightening silence, only a single tear marking her impassive face. Olivia embraced them, feeling her own heart break with the pain of those children. There were no words that could adequately comfort them, no explanation that made sense for such a loss. "I knew it," whispered David between sobs. "Deep down, I knew it. She would never abandon us." "Never," agreed Olivia. "Your mother loved you more than anything, of that I'm certain." They stayed like that for a long time, embraced in a silence broken only by David's occasional crying. Teresa withdrew discreetly, leaving them with their shared grief. Finally, when the sobs subsided, Olivia gently pulled away to look them in the eyes. "There's one more thing I need to tell you. The police arrested the man responsible for what happened to your mother, and they're looking for Ronald, who was working with him." David's eyes widened with a mixture of fear and relief. "He won't come back? He won't take us away?" "No," Olivia assured firmly. "He will never get near you again, I promise." It was at that moment that something extraordinary happened. Sophie, who had remained silent since she was found, spoke for the first time. Her voice was small, almost a whisper, but perfectly clear. "Can I stay with you?" The simple words hit Olivia like a wave of pure emotion. She looked at that child who, despite everything she had suffered, still found courage to trust, to hope, to speak. "Yes," she answered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Both of you can stay with me, for as long as you want." Sophie's face lit up with a shy smile, the first that Olivia had witnessed. David, still with tears in his eyes, but now mixed with a gleam of hope, asked, "Forever?" The question hung in the air, loaded with meaning. Forever was a huge promise, especially coming from someone like Olivia, who had always avoided lasting personal commitments. But looking at those two children, so wounded and yet so capable of loving, the answer came naturally. If you want, yes, forever. The morning continued at a different rhythm. The pain of the revelation was still there, but now there was also something new, a possibility, a direction, a family in formation. Olivia cancelled her trip to the office, deciding that the board could wait. Some battles were more important than others. Together, sitting in the garden under the shade of a leafy tree, they made plans. They talked about the school that David and Sophie would attend, about the therapy sessions that would help process the trauma, about the possibility of a memorial for Marlene. "We could plant a tree for her," suggested David. Mom loved persimmon trees. She said they gave fruit even when everything seemed difficult. "That's a beautiful idea," agreed Olivia. "We can plant it right here in this garden." Sophie, still economical with words but clearly more comfortable expressing herself, pointed to a sunny spot near the fountain. "There," she said simply. The day passed like this, between tears and smiles, between painful memories and plans for the future. In the afternoon, Olivia received a call from Sandra. The board meeting had been postponed after some members reconsidered their support for Gregory. Apparently, the story about the rescue of the children, now linked to the arrest of an influential businessman for serious crimes, had changed the public perception of Olivia's actions. "The press is calling you a heroine," informed Sandra, with a hint of amusement in her voice. Even Adele Campbell seems to have changed her tone. She published an article talking about the courage to face a flawed system to protect vulnerable children. "Ironic," commented Olivia, unable to avoid a smile, "but I'm not doing this for publicity." "We all know that now," replied Sandra. "Seriously. Even the board realized that you're genuinely involved, and that surprisingly only increased the respect for you." At the end of that afternoon, while observing David teaching Sophie to feed the fish in the small pond in the garden, Olivia received another call from Detective Richardson. Ronald had been captured trying to leave the city. He didn't offer resistance. Like most predators, he was a coward when confronted on equal terms. "He's talking a lot, trying to negotiate," informed the detective. He confessed involvement in hiding Marlene's body and admitted that Adams paid him to take guardianship of the children, keeping them under control. "Are they really safe now?" asked Olivia, observing the siblings from a distance. "Yes. All those involved are in custody. The case will still have developments, and unfortunately the children will probably have to testify at some point, but the immediate danger has passed." Upon hanging up, Olivia allowed herself a moment of pure relief. The storm hadn't completely passed. There was still much to resolve, much healing to happen, but the sky was beginning to clear. A week later, in a simple ceremony in the mansion's garden, they planted the persimmon tree in memory of Marlene. David had written a small speech, which he read with a trembling but determined voice. Sophie placed flowers around the newly planted sapling, while Olivia watered the earth with fresh water. "Mom used to say that roots are invisible, but they're what keeps the tree strong," commented David, observing the small tree that would one day grow imposing. "Like love. We don't see it, but it sustains everything." Olivia embraced the children, feeling strangely complete for the first time in many years. The path ahead would be challenging. There were legal processes to face, traumas to overcome, a new family dynamic to build, but now there was also purpose, connection, love. 3 months later, in a hearing room decorated with children's drawings on the walls, a different judge from the one at the first hearing signed the documents that formalized the permanent guardianship of David and Sophie for Olivia. It wasn't yet a formal adoption. That would be the next step when everyone was emotionally ready, but it was a legal commitment that reflected the bond already formed between them. Having analyzed all the reports, testimonies, and psychosocial evaluations, declared the judge, this court considers that the best interest of the children is to remain under the care of Ms. Olivia Parker, who has demonstrated not only adequate material conditions, but, mainly, genuine emotional commitment to the well-being of David and Sophie Taylor. Upon leaving the court, they were received by a small entourage: Simone, Teresa, August, Sandra, Dr. Reynolds, Dr. Rachel, even Cardoso and Martha from Child Protective Services. People who in different ways had participated in that extraordinary journey. "What will we do now?" asked David as they walked to the car. Olivia smiled, looking at Boston's sky, the same grey sky of early winter that had witnessed her first encounter with the boy, now transformed by the sun that was beginning to break through the clouds. "Now," she replied, holding the hands of David and Sophie, "we're going home." And at that moment, as the car glided through the streets of the city that had housed so many pains and now so many hopes, Olivia fully understood what she had done. It hadn't been just an impulsive rescue, nor an institutionalized charity mission. It had been a choice. The choice to stop when everyone kept going, to look when everyone averted their eyes, to stay when it would have been easier to leave. In a city where so many looked away, she had been the only one who stopped and stayed. And in that simple decision, 3 lives were forever transformed.